Welcome to Foot in Mouth, guys. The international break is finally over and these players are going to get some well-earned rest ahead of the new season. Now, it might not be all fun and games for most of them because let's not forget we are in the middle of a transfer window and there are some futures to be considered. Now, this is definitely one of the most stressful times for any football fan, and I think it's very easy to get lost in the hysteria of it all, so much so that there's probably a lot of things that we should think about before we get overly critical of how our clubs are moving. So, since the start of the pandemic, a lot of clubs around Europe still haven't been able to recover financially. And while I'm excited about the additions of Erling Haaland and Alvarez to the Premier League, I do think that those signings are going to set a precedent for clubs around Europe and it's going to affect their valuation of their players. Just take Victor Osimhen, for example, at Napoli. Really good striker, got a couple clubs interested in him, but since the sale of Nunes, Napoli feel that it's only fair that they get at least 80 mil for Osimhen as well because they think he's just as good. Now, obviously, whether or not a player is worth the money they go for is always going to be a debate, and it's down to the player to prove he's worth or not. But this is, and it's a domino effect that happens in football. We've seen it before. We saw it when Liverpool bought Virgil van Dijk for 75 mil. That eventually led to United having to spend 80 mil on Maguire. We saw it again when Liverpool bought Alisson for what was then a record fee for a goalkeeper, only for that record to be broken a month later by Chelsea when they had to spend 70 mil on Kepa. This is something that continues to happen, and I can't help feeling that it would be better for a club to act fast and get ahead of that domino effect. If anything, it helps you if your club is the one that is setting that financial bar for rivals to have to meet when signing players of their own. We also can't forget the fact that there are a lot of clubs in the Premier League currently going through projects and rebuilds, and if you are one of those clubs, others in Europe are gonna be aware of that when you come knocking for one of their players because they will know rebuilds cost money. And with the state of some of these clubs, they can't afford to really have a tug of war of transfer fees, and it might be easy for these European clubs to cash in on a star if a Premier League club is willing to pay the price. Now, this won't always be the case, of course. These clubs are in financial trouble, so they are just as likely to be taken advantage of. Look at Frenkie de Jong at Barcelona. The club don't necessarily want to sell him, and he himself has been open about wanting to stay, and he wants to play in the Champions League club. But with Man United looking like they are willing to reach an £80 million offer, Barcelona can't afford to say no, so they're gonna have to think about this, and this is where selling players gets especially tricky. Clubs are going to want to take the player into account, but this is a business, okay? They put a lot of time, money and resources into the development of these players, and they are going to want to be compensated for it when selling. And even if they aren't selling a player, they also know a good deal when they see one, and they can't always turn them down. Now, these big money signings don't always guarantee success, of course. We've seen big money players flop before, and it doesn't seem like it at first. You know, your club make that announcement, you see that Fabrizio Romano tweet, you're over the moon thinking that your club has pulled off a deal of the century. You jump on Twitter and you're talking big, and that season starts, man. 5-6 games in, you realize all you've got is Nicolas Pepe and a foot in your mouth. As exciting as these transfers are, there is always that risk, and clubs aren't going to want to be taking that risk for much longer, especially with the market inflating at the rate that it's going at. You're getting normal transfers that are edging closer and closer to these types of fees that make clubs think twice, and so you can bet that they are going to take their time and scrutinize every aspect of a deal before spending a single cent. Now, one thing to consider especially is the league itself. Over the years, there's been this growing obsession around Premier League proven players and the importance to a team. Now, while you might want this, you are going to have to pay for it, and much like you get at one of these struggling European sides, these clubs are going to hike the prices on these stars. They do not want to help a direct rival, so you got to make it worth their while. Now, there will of course be a lot of wheeling and dealing across Europe during this transfer window, but I can't help wondering if it would make more sense to look for most of those deals closer to home. It's going to be a struggle for our clubs to sell players now that the European clubs are struggling. I mean, just look at Arsenal. We're getting Hector Bellerin and Lucas Torreira back now because their clubs can't afford to take them up on the purchase option that was in the loan agreement. And they were low fees. Very, very low fees. This is going to be a problem that Premier League clubs run into, and they are going to make some compromises. They have no choice right now. So all that's left to do is see who benefits from it and who bottles it. The big question I'm left with now is, do I want to see my club overpay on some new fancy European player from overseas? Or would I prefer to see them overpay for a safer Premier League option? And I think that this is a dilemma a lot of Premier League clubs are going to be faced with, and a lot of decisions could come down to it. I could of course be wrong. This is the transfer window, and in typical transfer window fashion, out of the blue, Fabrizio Romano coming through with those three beautiful words. Here we go, announcing the signing of a Vieira to Arsenal. And while it's not Patrick, his name is Fabio Vieira. Arsenal signing him for Porto, and £40 million. That's the apparent fee. That is a big fee for a surprise transfer like that. But hey, this is the transfer window. We know how it goes. Guys, thank you for watching this video. Please hit that like button if you did like this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. And you can connect with me now on Twitter and Instagram as well. I've finally gotten foot and mouth on those platforms. So reach out to me there. DM me. Let me know if there's anything that you guys would like to hear me talk about. That could be cool. And as always, let me know in the comments below what you think about this transfer window, man. We'll catch you in the next one.